Well, good evening, everyone. So great to see you all here for the 26th Annual Bloom-Futaba Memorial Lectures. I'm Dexter Marr. I'll be your MC tonight, and I'm also the program convener. We're delighted to have you here on the eve of Al Bloom's 99th birthday. Through all the different karmic circumstances, Al, was here to provide this kind of legacy for us. This memorial lecture series is his beloved gift to the Hawaii Betsuin Sangha and the community, and to give folks an opportunity to learn from some of the brightest minds in modern Buddhism. So please enjoy his legacy. Special welcome to our in-person participants for braving Oahu traffic on a rainy evening here in Honolulu, and to our Zoom viewers, all over the islands and everywhere, nowadays. Okay. First, I'd like to thank the following people for their continuing support of this program. Of course, the late Dr. Al Bloom, the founder, Dorothy Nell Bloom, co-founder, and his lovely wife, the late Fay Mar, my co-convener for over 10 years and my partner for 54 years, Dr. George Tanabe, Respondent extraordinaire, Rimbam Yuika Hisebe, who's watching us on Zoom right now, our Chief Minister of the Hawaii Betsuin, Cindy Alm, our Hawaii Betsuin President, and Dave Atchison, the Mission of Hawaii and Hawaii Betsuin Communication Specialist and Technical Wizard. Next, a little bit of housekeeping. Our bathroom is right outside this door in the little courtyard. If the door is closed, the bathroom code is 9032. We have refreshments, water and coffee outside, and some sandwiches and cookies. You can only have them during the break because only water is allowed inside, this room, because it's served as a temple. The Zoom questions, please use chat. Your audios will be muted unless you're asked to clarify a chat entry. And we will be recording these presentations for later viewing on our Hawaii Betsuin YouTube channel. If you wish not to be seen, then please hide yourself on the video. Or, put a nice picture in there. Okay. This year we have a special treat in having Professor Paula Arai share her insights from her forthcoming book of Mud and Lotuses, Dreaming the Lives of Buddhist Women, with particular focus on Ishini, partner Shinran, in lecture number 1, and domestic Dharma in World War II Japan in lecture number 2. Our longtime friend and respondent, Dr. George Tanabe, will help facilitate our discussion. Professor Arai grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and graduated from Kalamazoo College, then attended Harvard University for graduate studies in religion, completing both her master's and PhD degrees. Paula has had an extensive academic career with positions from Hong Kong University to Carleton College in Minnesota to Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. And in 2023, she went to what she calls the Pure Land in Berkeley and became the first recipient of the Ishini and Kakashini Professor of Women and Buddhist Studies Chair at the Institute of Buddhist Studies in Berkeley, California. Established in November 2020 by the Institute for Buddhist Studies with the Buddhist Churches of America Federation of Buddhist Women's Associations as founding donors, this professional chair honors Ishini and Kakashini, pivotal female figures in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, and the wife and daughter of Shinran Shonin, respectively. Reflecting on how the Ishini and Kakashini chair arose from a desire from the Jodo Shinshu community to study and amplify women's voices, Dr. Arai said that this chair affirms the values of devoting decades of my life to researching the contributions and experiences of Buddhist women. Being the first steward of this chair, I'm aware of the countless women who came before me. They planted seeds of liberation that enable us to enjoy the fruits of their commitment. For this, I am humbled and grateful beyond measure. Women have always played a crucial role in the protection and nourishment of the Buddha Dharma. The important role is highlighted and supported by the Ishini and Kakushini chair. Welcome, Professor Arai and Kai, her husband, on returning to Hawaii after 16 years for your Bloom-Futaba encore.
Well, thank you for that very warm introduction, Dex, and for all of you joining this evening, both here and there. Well, I'm just tearing up because thinking, how did I get here? Dr. Bloom was a visiting professor when I was in graduate school at Harvard, and he's my first teacher of Pure Land Buddhism. And that to be in this Eshini and Kakushini chair is a very powerful thing to be part of, because all the women who we don't know their names, but we know they were there. It is humbling to sit here hoping that I can help you hear their voices. As mother and daughter approach the lush garden, the fragrance of jasmine blossoms wafts through the morning air. A peacock's cry announces their arrival to the sacred Indian Buddhist grounds. Clouds of incense from pots hanging from the trees beckon them to walk into the Sanchi compound, moving first to the Ganda Kuti perfumed chamber, the place where the Buddha's presence lingers. They bow with palms together. Walking toward the stupa, the intricacy of carvings on its surface come into view. Oh, Mama, look at that beautiful carving of women on the gate. That mound looks like the bump on your belly. I hope the baby is born soon so we can play together. I can't wait. I'm excited for the baby too, you know, dear one. My mother brought me here when I was about to give birth to you. And she was brought here by her mother before I was born. Each visit brought us a healthy baby, but not everyone is so fortunate. I am so grateful for the blessings of your health. You are growing into such an observant and caring girl. Your grandmother would be so happy if she could see the joy and curiosity in your eyes. Hand in hand, they go to make offerings and pray for the blessings of a safe and healthy birth. Women can imagine their bodies affirmed in the monument at the core of the Buddhist tradition, the stupa. We can picture how the symbolism of the stupa as the womb of a Buddha might spark a conversation between a mother and daughter, such as the one above. Intimate exchanges, however, are not commonly recorded and preserved, though they are vital to how women shared their wisdom over the millennia. To hear Buddhist women's voices reverberating through our history and our hearts is liberating. Each voice we hear functions like a distillation of countless voices that we have not heard. The materials about and by women have burgeoned in the last decades. It is still the case that most everything we hear about the Buddhist tradition is distorted due to the yawning holes in our knowledge of what the vast majority of Buddhist women thought, felt, and did. A more balanced view requires creative strategies to explore how Buddhist women experienced suffering and liberation in personal and communal contexts. I strive to hear the voices of women and dispel the fog of misogyny that obscures our view of the Dharma. To that end, I wrote fictional stories of women liberating the Dharma from concepts and conditions that generate suffering for women. My book of Lotuses and Mud, Dreaming the Lives of Buddhist Women, will be published next summer. These stories integrate my Dharma-informed imagination with scholarship on historical figures, texts, and contexts. I also compose stories that draw on ethnographic material I gathered from deep conversations with several contemporary women. Listening to their stories reveals the continuing challenges, perspicacity, and resilience of women today. Taken together, these stories offer a journey into the lives of Buddhist women. Today, I will share 4 stories that span nearly 800 years and bridge Japan and the U.S. I hope to inspire research and interpretations that are inclusive and empower women to wield the Dharma in ways that are liberative. Seeing women more fully helps us see the whole tradition more clearly, for without including women, everything is distorted. The scholarly sources I have consulted and the fictive characters I have created suggest possibilities of where to look for information and what to recognize as knowledge. I aspire to generate options for living practitioners to wield the Dharma in the face of oppressive conditions, injustices, and the life challenges by including stories of living women who wield the liberating power of the Dharma to face the suffering in their lives. Lastly, I want to empower people to create a world of less suffering and delusions, a world of more peace and love. I'm not going to give up imagining that. Each dimension of these aims is integral to the larger interdependent nature where no one is fully liberated until all are liberated. Setting out on this quest, I was inspired by the clarion voice of Buddhist scholar Miranda Shaw. She awakens us to a female-centered view of the early Buddhist landscape. The half-dome shape of a stupa reflects a supine pregnant belly. Her paradigm-shifting insight opens wide a window onto how a woman might experience the central architectural form of the early Buddhist tradition. Shaw fills in the picture of a stupa mound with significant details and illuminating information. Designed to harbor Shakyamuni Buddha's relics, a stupa is a womb for an enlightened being. That the stupa, quoting her, that the stupa is a womb is reflected in the Buddhist terminology. The mound is termed womb or garbha, while the central receptacle encasing the relics is the egg, anda, end quote. She directs attention to the fecund imagery of a stupa site, including vegetation, fruit trees, and, quote, female figures whose ample breasts and hips proclaim their fertility, end quote. Taking into account a fuller range of symbols and images, Shaw concludes that, quote, the integrated body of imagery around a stupa is the visual vocabulary of a theology of female generative power, end quote. I imagined what the Buddhist world would look like if that's the way I was raised to see it. The story with which I began this book was what I saw. I felt fully and completely affirmed and included just as I am, a daughter, a mother, a follower of the Buddhist path. These insights of the fecundity built into a central early Buddhist monument summons us to open our minds to see from a woman's perspective that promises to qualitatively deepen our understanding of the Buddhist tradition. Scholarship has made advances in the ways in which women have been limited by certain teachings, institutions, and practices. But most of women's activities are obscured in the mists of time and clouded over by interpretations of history that are filtered through an elite male monastic perspective. The prevailing interpretation of institutionalized male practices and exclusionary doctrines obscure how women might have responded. A prominent and widely circulated narrative, reinforced by scholarly selectivity, leaves the impression that women were impaired in their effort to seek liberation from suffering. However, the negative treatment of women is not the only important part of the story. We know that women have been active since the beginning of the Buddhist tradition. Moreover, that all people come out of a woman's womb is an underappreciated fact in much of historical analysis. It is often treated as if it were just a metaphor. The fact that without a woman, the Buddhist tradition would not have been born is in some ways a simplistic and other ways fundamental. Focusing on this fact can help us see how women have been practically, historically, and conceptually vital to the founding and development of this tradition. Maya Devi nurtured the Buddha to be in her body. The food she ate were the first food offerings. Mahaprajapati, the mother who raised him as her own, provided necessities that would eventually blossom into his awakening. His wife, Yashodhara, bequeathed more love manifest in their son Rahula, who would become part of the next generation to pass on the Dharma his father taught. Women actively nurtured in their bodies and fed with their breasts all those who followed the Buddha. Women's hands tended each follower as they learned to walk and cared for them when sick. These women embodied the wisdom that compassion is a concrete act of care. In a stream flowing from days of yore, all the women who gave birth to these mothers made a critical contribution to what became the Buddhist tradition. In a current streaming onward, all the children who passed the Dharma forward connected us to awakened wisdom that is integral to the Buddhist tradition. Women were successful in nurturing a tradition that now spans the world and for over 2,500 years offers direction to those aching to stop suffering. Nonetheless, the historical record of women's activities and contributions to the Buddhist tradition are incomplete. Moreover, a significant amount of information we do have is filtered through ideas and assumptions that were developed without women's input in mind. In important ways, complete information is not possible due to the types of pragmatic and everyday activities in which women were engaged that were not recorded, such as what I highlighted in the preceding paragraph. Consequently, to dispel the distorted and often negative images we do have, we need to engage a multisensorial approach. Fortified by research and amplified by imagination, I have employed the creative expedient of storytelling to bring to life Buddhist women who laughed and cried in times and places that are continuous with our own. Encouraged by the knowledge that Buddhist sutras are replete with stories to animate the teachings, and that historical people crafted and recorded these stories, I realized it was still relevant and valuable to compose Dharma stories. I decided to take it upon myself to do so. I can visualize women inspired and energized by the Buddhist teachings. I can imagine how women could live in accord with the Dharma. I can see women navigating situations to ameliorate suffering. I can ponder ways women are likely to respond with compassion. I can engage in storytelling to make the concerns and contributions of women immediate. I launch my effort not with the question, did women seek cessation of suffering, but rather, how did women seek the cessation of suffering? Adding one word opens avenues of insight that regard women as agents in their own lives, as caring, hardworking, and serious. Exploring the cumulative tradition from the perspective of women's concerns will help us uncover visionary ways women might have integrated teachings on wisdom and loving kindness into their lives. This is the intro to the story, Eshin Ni's epistle on sex transformation in sutras. This part's real. In the summer of 2023, I was disappointed when I went to Kyoto to bow my head at both Higashi and Nishi Hongwanji. Neither of these capacious head temples of the Jodo Shinshu Buddhism had images in their worship halls of either of the critical women to the founding of their sect, Eshin Ni and Kakushin Ni. I feel a karmic connection to them, as mentioned, because the Institute of Buddhist Studies honored me to be the first steward of the chair. It is the first professorial chair I know about that is named after Buddhist women. In an incredible historical discovery, we learned significant information about these women through 10 letters the mother, Eshin Ni, wrote to her daughter, Kakushin Ni, spanning the years 1254 and 1268. Eshin Ni, the wife of Shinran, the central teacher of Jodo Shinshu, wrote these letters to their daughter 650 years before they were found, safely stored in a chest in Kyoto in 1921. This discovery tantalized me to consider the possibility of other letters we might one day find and gain deeper insight into the thoughts and feelings of women from an earlier era. Reading Eshin Ni's letters helped me feel closer to her, stimulating me to reflect on what she thought about a number of sutras, including the Lotus Sutra and the larger sutra on Amitayus. These sutras proclaim that women must transform into male bodies to become enlightened or be reborn in the Pure Land. A little more complicated than that, but basically. I also have Eshin Ni consider the teachings found in 2 other sutras that address the relationship of bodily form to enlightenment: the Vimalakirti Sutra and the Sutra on Transforming Women into Buddha. Her engagement with these sutras reveals her assessment on whether she thought sex transformation was required for enlightenment. Eshin Ni began writing these letters when she was 73, after she moved away from Kyoto to Echigo, present-day Niigata. Her daughter stayed in Kyoto and cared for her father. Eshini returned to her natal land in order to care for the land she owned. Being a landowner enabled her to support her family with its yield, including her husband's efforts to teach. This matriarchal arrangement that women with resources supported their husbands was still practiced during this period. Eshini's letters are a window into this time and provide some sense of her perspective, self-awareness, concerns, and expectations. We can see the particular ways that Shinjin, sometimes translated as entrusting, enabled her to be strong in the face of adversity. She trusted she would receive a compassionate response to suffering as she weathered hunger and illness. She never expressed doubt. Throughout years of famine and epidemic, she focused on caring for those around her, including 2 orphaned grandchildren, servants who tended the land and household for her, and her servants' families. She took her position as matriarch seriously and treated her workers as part of her extended family. Everyone struggled during these times of extreme hardship, facing her own vulnerability exacerbated by her advanced age, as she ensured she provided for others. Though she was surely aware that some Buddhist teachings espoused a doctrine that only those in male bodies could be enlightened or reborn in the Pure Land, she does not betray the slightest hint that she thought being a woman was an impediment. Indeed, in letter number 10 to Kakushin-ni, written toward the end of Eshini's life, she expressed confidence that they were both bound for rebirth in the Pure Land. Quoting the letter, how I wish there could be one more time for me to see you, and you to see me while I am now in this world. I myself will be going to the Pure Land paradise very soon. There, everything can be seen without any darkness. So be sure to say the Nembutsu and come to the paradise to be with me. Indeed, when we go to the paradise and meet again, nothing whatsoever will be in darkness. Perhaps she was not unlike her husband, Shinran, who heeded the Buddhist teachings to not blindly follow, but to test whether or not a teaching was effective in diminishing suffering. After 2 decades practicing Tendai, Shinran found the practices of that tradition were not effective for him, and he decided to follow a new Buddhist leader, Honen. He found Honen's teachings and practices helpful. Kakushin-ni also demonstrates resoluteness and does not exhibit signs of being inferior due to her femaleness. Her efforts were instrumental in solidifying her father's teachings, which eventually gave rise to the establishment of the Jodo Shin sect. 10 years after Shinran's passing, Kakushin-ni built a memorial hall for him. Numerous followers wanted a place to go to pay their respects. Given resources and land she inherited upon the passing of her husband, she chose to ensure the hall and the property it was built on would belong to the Jodo Shinshu Sangha for future generations. Her vision and devotion led her to establish the Otani Mausoleum. This concrete action facilitated followers to have a place to gather in Shinran's memory and enkindle his teachings centered on the expansive compassion of Amida Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light. For women who must navigate a place for themselves in a tradition that still wrestles with privileging men, what does Amida Buddha's compassion feel like? The mother and daughter of Jodo Shinshu model how to navigate the landscape of life with faith. demonstrating that their female forms are not an obstacle to receiving the full force of Amida's compassion. The legacy of the founding women apparently motivated Shin women to continue to exhibit a perspicacious understanding of the Dharma, notably evident in a 1932 article by Otani Kinuko, a leader in the National Fujinkai, the precursor to the Federation of Buddhist Women's Associations, in which she discussed the concerns of temple wives known as Bo-mori, or guardians of the temple. Though without official status, support, or protection, Bo-mori worked with their ordained husbands in meeting the needs of the temple community. Otani-san encouraged temple wives to practice Buddhism, not practice Shin rules. Her advice is in direct contrast to the texts written by male leaders of the Shin administration, which stress Shin rules. Women saw a gap between Shin rules regarding women and the Dharma. Their actions tell us how their faith in Amida fueled them. Indeed, using Shinran's own logic, if the more depraved a person is, the more likely they will rely on Amida's compassion. And if women are more depraved than men, it stands to reason that women would more likely exhibit Shinjin and trust in Amida's compassion, and hence be reborn in the Pure Land. That this might be so does not diminish the force negative teachings, regulations, and institutional structures have had on people. It only makes the women subjected to inferior treatment all the more remarkable when they serve with a smile, bow with gratitude, and lead with faith. Surely, historically and contemporaneously numerous myokonin, those heralded in Jojo Shin communities as exemplars of on-the-ground, everyday Buddhist faith, fill Shin temples as Bo-mori, and lay homes as single women, wives, mothers, and daughters. Their sincerity and humility being fundamental to their faith, they do not need recognition from anyone to receive Amida's compassion. Women may feel Amida's compassion at work in women receiving full institutional support and official acknowledgement for their efforts and contributions. As mothers, they have raised the Jodo Shin community, both inside the temple and inside the home. The intimate modeling of Shinjin while they work, cook, clean, and converse with others over tea seeps into the fabric of life, infusing it with Amida's compassion. In so doing, they buoy our world with people who move with care and although it's ripe. How is this? I will have to just add that sometimes moving to IBS, I felt like the mic finally got turned on. That's why I love it so much. Okay. Historically. Fundamental to their faith, they do not need recognition from anyone to receive Amida's compassion. Women may also feel Amida's compassion at work in women receiving full institutional support and official acknowledgement for their efforts and contributions. As mothers, I said this already, didn't I? They have raised the Jodo Shin community. You've heard that before. Okay. Who move with flow. Okay. Letters. Sorry, I know we got to be mindful of minutes here. Letters written by women are rich sources for learning about women's more nuanced thought. There are surely more letters and diaries that were written historically than we have access to today. The exercise of crafting a story based on historical letters invited me to imagine what a woman would think, feel, be concerned about, and hope for. Even though we will never know the full truth, understanding the socio-historical and religio-cultural context can help fortify plausibility. Moreover, the very effort to understand activates our radars and sensitivities so we can be better equipped to discern truth and untruths when we see them. Drawing on Eshin-Ni's letters and my understanding of teachings and texts Eshin-Mi might know, I imagine in the following fictionalized letter how Eshin-Ni might think about Buddhist teachings that suggest women's bodies are categorically deficient for rebirth in the Pure Land or enlightenment. My aim is to imagine a Dharma free from such limiting views of women and their female bodies. A Dharma that, in this freedom, fully allows men and women to entrust wisdom and compassion. I imagine Eshin-Ni would agree with this vision. December 26, 1270. Dearest daughter, the winter promises to continue being harsh, so I hope you too are able to manage and have enough food. I am having my trusted messenger bring you some dried persimmons. Being in my late 80s, I think it is important that I record my thoughts about being a woman. There are some passages in scriptures that had given me pause. Having deeply considered them, I have found a way to be helped by them, which is what sutras are meant to do. Sutras are to teach us how to stop suffering, not to generate suffering. I admit that at first I was puzzled by Amida's 35th vow. Quote, if, when I attain Buddhahood, women in the immeasurable and inconceivable Buddha lands of the 10 directions who, having heard my name, rejoice in faith, awaken aspiration for enlightenment, and wish to renounce womanhood, should after death be reborn again as women, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. End quote. My natural response was that Amida Buddha's compassion already supports me. Ever since your father helped me feel the mysterious depth of Amida's compassion in my life, I have rejoiced in entrusting heart. I have not, however, renounced being a woman. Perhaps my logic is simplistic, but it must be that Amida succeeded in becoming a Buddha. Therefore, as a woman, I feel safe in my sincere entrustment of Amida. Amida's primal vow affirms that compassion is for all beings who entrust, and nowhere does it suggest it is limited to those with male bodies. Quote, if, when I attain Buddhahood, sentient beings in the lands of the 10 directions who sincerely and joyfully entrust themselves to me, desire to be born in my land, and think of me even 10 times, should not be born there, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. In my mind, the 18th vow outweighs the ambiguous language in the 35th vow with regard to women being reborn in the Pure Land. I've also mulled over 3 other sutras that include teachings about women's bodies. Like others, I found the story about a bodhisattva doubting the dragon princess in the Lotus Sutra both tantalizing and open for interpretation. The young female demonstrates both her supreme understanding of the Dharma and supernatural capacity to change her body at will. She uses her skills to attain Buddhahood and transform herself into a male body. Yet, this teaching occurs in a sutra well known for teaching about skillful use of liberative techniques as acts of compassion to help people. Remember, this is the sutra with the story about a father who lies to his children to get them out of a burning house. The Dragon Princess story culminates with 3,000 living beings opened up the thought of Bodhi. So, it seems to me she could have changed into a male form as a skillful means to help those who doubted a female, much less an 8-year-old one, could have supreme wisdom. The story highlights her magnificence. The part about turning into a male body is noted in passing. It just doesn't make sense for a path of liberation to discriminate against certain body types. Then I found a teaching in the Vimalakirti Sutra that gave me clarity on the matter of male and female bodies. The sutra devotes a whole chapter to a goddess instructing on the meaning and significance of non-duality. I actually found it somewhat humorous. A goddess employed her magical power to cause the elder Shariputra, one of Buddha's disciples, to appear in her form and to cause herself to appear in his form. She then delivers the Buddha's teaching. In all things there is neither male nor female. It is nice to hear a sutra be explicit on this matter, because I am tired of those with narrow and rigid thinking about women. We're sentient beings too. We have issues, but we want to stop suffering just as much as anyone. Another sutra has also been clarifying. It is called the Sutra on Transforming Women into Buddhas. It proclaims that, quote, every woman's body, these are all the mothers of the Buddhas of the 3 times. Like the great sea or the great earth, a woman's body is the matrix of the thus come ones, end quote. This confirmed my understanding that the Buddha offered a path available to all sentient beings, including women in their female bodies. There was one more observation I've made that at this age I am no longer embarrassed to share with you. You know how one of the 32 marks of a Buddha is a sheathed lingam? It has been invoked as proof that a woman must transform into a male body in order to be a Buddha. Well, maybe it's because monks who don't know any better conjured up this idea, but I think sheathed lingam well describes female anatomy too. Therefore, there is no impediment to a woman or a man being a Buddha. So, I do not see how the 35th vow can be understood as an obstacle to anyone being reborn in the Pure Land. This is where entrusting Amida's compassion has led me. I patiently await more people, especially men, learn about non-dual wisdom and deepen their faith in Amida's compassion. I am at peace with my interpretations. I hope you find peace. There's another story. Are we okay with time? Okay. This one is called Diary of a Blood Pond Sutra Devotee. First is an introduction, then the story. The Blood Pond Sutra, a late 12th century Chinese apocryphal sutra, reveals how ingenious women can be. Women in China and Japan developed strategies to navigate the beliefs instilled by the scripture, which taught that all women go to a hell pool filled with blood spilled during childbirth and menstruation. Evidence suggests women who were not primary wives in medieval China found the sutra helped them in their relationships with the children they birthed. Socially, all the man's children were considered the children of the primary wife. It's a soap opera, so pay attention. So primary wife, regardless of who the biological mother was. Therefore, in the hierarchical structure of one man having children with multiple wives, when a wife other than the primary wife died, her biological children had no ritual to properly grieve her, because her funerary rites did not acknowledge her as a mother, because it's the primary wife is the mother of all of them. The Blood Pond Sutra provided the impetus. The sutra asserts a woman could be released from the blood pond hell if her children were filial. In a Confucian-based society, encouraging filial piety supplanted the convention that sundered mothers and their children, at least in death. The Blood Pond Sutra, did you follow that? So now the children have to be filial to their mothers, so these women must now be acknowledged as mothers. That trumped the sutra saying, and the convention, that they weren't mothers. Now, because they're going to be in the hell, they let the mothers be acknowledged. The Blood Pond Sutra began circulating in Japan during the 15th century. Zen priest Unne Taizan stressed women can use the sutra as a talisman. Kumano bhikkhuni, nuns of Kumano, were women who traveled significant distances in nuns' garments and offered talismans for fertility and safe childbirth for a small donation. They did not necessarily join the institutionalized ordination system. I chose Mount Tateyama in Toyama Prefecture because there is geographically a pond designated as a blood pond. There is also a Tateyama mandala with an illustration of a Ketsubon Kyo. That's the Japanese for Blood Pond Sutra. There's a Ketsubon Kyo dedication service. Women who died during childbirth are depicted in the blood pond hell. Monks are shown throwing copies of the sutra to the women in the pond. The efficacy of this ritual is presented by women reborn on lotuses. During the Edo period, this ritual was done for women to have safe and healthy childbirths. An amulet of this sutra transformed from a source of teaching that women are condemned to a blood pond hell upon death to a source of protection for pregnant women. The ritual involved women procuring an amulet and tucking it into her obi wrap. After giving birth, women would remove and cut the 7 Sanskrit characters invoking Jizo Bodhisattva. She would drink a tiny piece of paper with water, one at a time for 7 evenings. The remainder of the amulet would be returned to the temple, whereupon she would receive a fresh copy to support her through recovering from the tremendous ordeal of childbirth. The region has revived an Edo period women's liberation ritual done before 1866, which fosters people today to imagine women of the past in a vibrant way. The geological landscape is dramatic, with volcanic activity and sword-like mountain peaks. I saw many of them today. There are rust-colored ponds known as blood ponds, invoking the Blood Pond Sutra, which teaches that women are to be reborn in a blood pond hell due to their patriarchal and menstrual blood. Rituals involving throwing copies of the sutra into such red waters were performed at numerous sites around Japan. Do you have any in Hawaii? Red ponds? Maybe not blood ponds, but anyway. Ritual, okay. At Mount Osorezan's Ensuji Temple, amulets of the Ketsubon Kyo are available for people to get, and during a ritual, throw into a blood pond on the temple grounds on behalf of women who died in childbirth. Thousands of stone images produced by women's groups called 19th Night Consororities leave physical evidence of their activities around Japan. These groups were focused on protecting women during times of vulnerability around conceiving, birthing, and raising a child. Though there is little preserved written documentation of the activities of these ordinary local women, these stone images are engraved with the name of their group and feature the figure of Nyoirin Kannon, a goddess particularly known for her protecting women in childbirth. Japanese women also created ways to have the sutra support them and not just denigrate and oppress them. Taking cues from evidence of what practices, chants, and rituals Japanese women did, including the practice of women known as Kumano Bhikkhuni, who traveled around Japan distributing teachings related to women, I narrate a story that animates how women did and can wield liberating wisdom when faced with a Buddha's words that deems their bodies a source of suffering, arising from their capacity to give birth. Our story begins in a village at the foot of Mount Tateyama, a towering volcanic mountain historically recognized to have a blood pond hell in its environs. Into this historical scenario, I have inserted a group of fictive women who live there. They come to life through passages from the imagined diary of Tora-san. In the first entry, she is a newly married 17-year-old. Letters and diaries written by women are rich sources for learning about women's more nuanced thought. There are surely more diaries that were written historically, but we do not have access to them today. The exercise of crafting the stories based on a diary invited me to imagine what a woman would think, feel, and be concerned about, afraid of, and hope for. Understanding socio-historical and cultural context can help fortify viable possibility, but we will never know the full truth. Trying, however, activates our radars and sensitivities so we can be better equipped to discern when we hear the truth. For the Blood Pond Sutra, we literally have hard facts, namely thousands of stone markers inscribed with 19th night, verifying that women gathered in these spots. What we lack are soft facts, the things women said to each other when they met, and the things a woman wrote in her own diary as she processed matters of the heart relating to be a woman in 18th century Japan. Come along as we imaginatively enter this woman's world of understanding, support, and historically documented creative responses to a sutra that denigrates female bodies. October 20, 1748. I went to my first gathering of the 19th night group last night. I'm still shaken by the sutra we chanted. The older women there seemed unfazed by it. Afterward, some even laughed about it. How can they take it so lightly? They clearly understand something I don't. I do seem to be behind in learning about some women's things. I guess that's not surprising since Mama died giving birth to Minami. Having helped raise my younger sister, I look forward to having children, especially since I have keen thoughts about how not to do it. Our stepmother treated us as burdens, even when we tried to help. I would not have even known about this woman's gathering had my new mother-in-law not encouraged me to go. There were about 15 women there last night. Although I was a bit shy being introduced as the newest and youngest to join the group, I felt warmly welcomed. It was comforting to be surrounded by women who were near my age, as well as women who had clearly weathered many seasons. Some were quiet, others were somewhat outspoken with a great sense of humor. I felt like I belonged, like the lack I felt growing up without my mother would be filled. We did a short ritual. There was an endearing carving of Nyoidin Kannon on a low table at the front of the room. The women rotate who is to bring flowers and food offerings. One of the older women lit a candle and incense. Another woman rang a bell, indicating when to bow. After 3 bows, we chanted the Heart Sutra. Like most people, I could chant it by memory. Then they began to chant a sutra I had never heard before. Why were women in hell wallowing in a pond full of menstrual blood and forced to drink it? Beaten with an iron rod if they refused? Wasn't a sutra supposed to be the words of an enlightened being? What is going on? The part about washing out our monthly cloths, polluting the water tea is made with is infuriating because women are very careful about such things. A man must have written this. The ritual ended with prayers. Some prayed for getting pregnant. Others prayed for a safe birth for their baby and themselves. Women added prayers for sisters and friends who were not there, some because they were caring for sick children. After the personal prayers, the women intoned a formal prayer in unison, and this is paraphrasing the actual sutra. May all women be released from the blood pond hell and reborn in Buddha's land. Most of the evening was spent on sharing stories. One elder woman who seemed to be a special visitor guided us by weaving wisdom into her tale of affliction and adversity. The night drew to a close with a bell and a bow. As I was walking out, a middle-aged woman came over to welcome me. She had an especially warm smile and sparkle in her eye. Her name is Kane-san. I immediately sensed her care. She is how I imagine Mama would be if she were still around. I miss her. November 20, 1748. It's hard to believe 1 month has already passed. During casual conversation over tea, I felt like I was being initiated into a woman's world of unvarnished honesty and humor. When one young woman complained about her cramps, a refreshingly salty woman named Kuma-san exclaimed, "That's why we don't have to do certain rituals and such when it's our time of the month. Men think they're controlling us because we're polluted, but really it's because they're afraid of blood. They have no idea that their rules are really giving us a break when we need it most. Besides, who wants to move around a lot more and risk soiling our clothes? There's enough laundry as it is." Kane-san even chimed in. She thought these rules were humane because they gave women time to rest and be restored by having a respite to reflect. These women's gatherings are fantastic. January 20, 1749. I missed my period. This is the first time it's happened. I'm usually so regular. I guess we have been married for 4 months, but I didn't know it would happen this fast. So it must be. Before going to the gathering, I was a tumult of emotions. I was excited about becoming a mother, but Fear of dying like Mama felt like a typhoon roaring through me. I was practically paralyzed with the thought that, I can't even say it, that a storm would return my baby to the waters. My best friend is still struggling to get up and prepare food after that happened to hers. When I shared this at the gathering, I could feel the fear of dying in childbirth ripple through the circle of women. Tomi-san chanted Namo Amida Butsu under her breath. Kane-san walked over to me, held my hands and looked deeply into my eyes. You are not alone, Tora-san. We are here for you. As we chanted the Blood Pond Sutra together, instead of being repulsed by it, I felt embraced in a wave of understanding. Their voices bathed me in compassion. They all prayed for me with a sincerity that made me feel it would be all right. February 20, 1749. Kane-san gave me an amulet to protect me through pregnancy and delivery. She had traveled a great distance to a Kumano Bhikkhuni, a kind of Buddhist nun known for understanding the types of suffering women face. It turns out it was the elder women who had shared a powerful story that first night I joined the gathering. Kane-san trusted this nun, so she wanted to get the special Blood Pond Sutra amulet from her. There are many Kumano Bhikkhuni who travel around the Kiki Peninsula, supporting the women with teachings and these special amulets. I peeked inside the cloth amulet. On very thin paper, a copy of the Blood Pond Sutra was inside. May 20, 1749. My belly has suddenly swelled, throwing off my balance. I've learned that means things are progressing on schedule. Kane-san knew how to wrap the long cotton sash obi, hara obi, just tight enough to support my growing belly and relieve the strain on my lower back. She tucked the amulet she had given me in between the folds of the obi so it would stay close to my body. I felt both protected and less back pain. August 10, 1749. My daughter, Hatsu, was born. We are both safe. The Blood Pond Sutra amulet works. Of course, the women in their prayers saw me through too. October 18, 1755. I have been so busy raising my children, I have not had time to write. Today, though, I must write. We all gathered for Tomi-san's funeral. She died in childbirth. I carried a small statue of Noidin Kannon to place on a large flat rock we used as an altar at the edge of a blood pond pool. Others brought food offerings that, as the sutra prescribed, we would later feast on. We came to this desolate place on the craggy mountains for funerals. The aroma of sulfur cast a solemn pall over us. The sutra assures liberation for those who hold a blood pond liberation service, which includes chanting the sutra and doing a secret ritual shared among women. We took a quiet moment at the edge of the pond. In silence, we each reverently held a blood pond amulet to our bowed foreheads. The amulets rent the pond as we threw them to set our prayers for Tomi-san free. Then, as the sutra instructs, we placed a copy of the sutra into a boat and set it afloat in the pond. The sutra promises that after doing so, quote, a 5-colored lotus flower would appear in the middle of the blood pond, end quote. As the sun sank lower on the horizon, a few women went with me to place the Nyoirin Kannon on Tomi-san's grave. I have come to trust that women would not be condemned to the blood pond hell. I believe the sutra not only assures safe births, but if the woman did die in childbirth, she would be reborn in the Pure Land. May 24, 1756. 8 days ago, I gave birth to my 4th child. Tomi-san was on my mind. My father-in-law gave my son the name Kennosuke, as I had done with my other 3 babies. For the first 7 nights, I did the ritual to invoke Jizo Bodhisattva's protection. It's especially helpful while recovering from delivery. I removed the paper from the blood pool amulet. The 7 Sanskrit syllables for Jizo's dharani are written on it. Onka ka kabi sammange. Each night, I carefully tore off 1 Sanskrit syllable and swallow it with a glass of water. For extra protection, I also whisper the Heart Sutra. Today, I went to the temple to receive a fresh copy of the sutra and return the one that had served me. I always feel comforted keeping the sutra close to my body, especially until I am fully restored from the birth. It seems like a lifetime ago when I was disturbed by this sutra. Now I see that the sutra brings women together. When we gather, we naturally support each other. This is what makes the sutra so powerful. I don't know how I would have survived without my 19th night group. June 2nd, 1757. My younger sister, Minami, gave birth to her first child today. They are both safe. I'm sure the amulet helped. When the time comes, I will give one to her daughter, too. Thank you.
Okay, so now it's time for George to respond, and then I think we'll take a little 10-minute break, so you can kind of process, the response and maybe your questions or comments for Paula and George.
Do you want a taller one?
Okay, no, this is fine. It's working? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Paula. I will never be able to look at this building again in the same way because there are stupas on the top. So I hope that all of you also will look at this building in a very new way because of what Paula pointed out in terms of the symbolism of the stupa. I want to try to be as brief as I can because we don't have too much time, and I want to be able to have people respond with your own comments and questions. But I think I have to warn you that it's going to be very difficult for me to be brief because you are dealing with a topic that is very dear to my heart, and that is the relationship between fact and fiction and the use of fiction. And the Buddhist tradition is filled with fiction. In fact, I would argue that the majority of the Mahayana sutras, at any rate, are basically fiction. You mentioned the Lotus Sutra. What a great anthology of stories. And what we're talking about is the power of storytelling. And fiction, is often understood to be, or we use the word fiction in order to, as a kind of a synonym for lie. If you're telling a fiction, you're telling a lie. But the Buddhist tradition has been very clear about understanding the power of fiction, which sometimes is referred to as upaya, as expedient means, that yes, it's not really factual, but you're telling a lie in order to tell a truth, or you're using fiction in order to point out a fact. So I want to explore with you this whole relationship between fact and fiction, and the literary record, because the written record is we can sort of find the sort of the hard fact strata, the one that talks about history and facts. And then there is the strata which is fictional. So some of you remember, many of you remember, I hope, that we invited Vanessa Sasson last year to be the Futaba lecturer. And the year before that, I had invited her to participate in the Hawaii Book and Music Festival. And I'm really interested in her work, as I am in yours, precisely because she is dealing with fiction. So she wrote a book called Yasodhara, which is the Buddha's wife. And it's and by her own admission, it's a novel. It's fiction. But she's also, a really solid Sanskritist. I mean, she knows the text really well. She knows the historical record, the story of Yasodhara. But what she did in her book, in her novel, is to use fictional techniques. That is to say, dialogue that you don't find in the historical record, characters that you don't find in the historical record, and plot that you don't find in the historical records. And those are all the techniques of a fiction writer: dialogue, character, and plot. And what Vanessa did, it seems to me, is that she took the story of Yasodhara and she fleshed it out. And so she made Yasodhara become a real, live woman, by allowing us to see into her feelings, into her heart, into her thinking, which the historical record does not articulate, but her story does. And so, she uses fiction in order to make Yasodhara become more real. In other words, she did not change the historical record. She just fleshed it out. But you can also use fiction to change the historical record. So if the historical record says, for instance, that women are inferior, you can write stories to counter that and say that, there's the other side as well. And I point out that use of fiction because I wrote a novel about a real monk in Japan. But I did not do what Vanessa did, which was to use fiction to flesh out the story of this monk. I completely changed the story of this monk in my fiction. And so is it still the story of this monk? I don't know. I should ask you to decide that. If the book ever gets published, it's still on my computer. But at any rate, we can use fiction in these different ways. And Vanessa and I got so involved. We had long discussions about these two ways of using fiction to flesh out the historical record or to change the historical record. And we got so involved in that whole idea that we actually proposed a new series to the University of Hawaii Press called Buddhist Fiction. And so we wrote out a proposal, Vanessa and I did in our enthusiasm and submitted it to University of Hawaii Press, and they basically rejected it, saying, well, we really don't do fiction, we do scholarly monographs, plus there are not that many people out there writing what might be called Buddhist fiction, and so you're going to have trouble finding manuscripts. And this is like 3 years ago. And so I think it's true. So when I saw what you were doing and with your new book coming out, I thought, we could have had Paula in our series, and come back and say, no, people are writing more Buddhist fiction. So Christoph Emmerich, I don't know if you know him, but he's at the University of Toronto, and I were talking about this whole thing about Buddhist fiction, and he actually put together a whole semester course on Buddhist fiction. And what he does is he takes novels that have Buddhist themes, but he also treats, as in his words, Buddhism as fiction. And he's looking at the sutra literature, which is a lot of fiction, a lot of just stories like the Lotus Sutra again. So if you combine those two, you have a really substantial corpus of literary works that are essentially fictional, and then you can go into and explore them for all the kinds of really interesting things that they have to say. So here's my question to you. Okay, so it has to do with this relationship again between the historical record and the fictional stories that you're going to write. And my question to you is your intent about writing the fictional stuff to simply flesh out, as Vanessa did with Yasodhara, to simply flesh out the historical record, or to change the historical, not change, but to add something that is not in the historical record? Now, it seems to me that what you did with Eshini's letters is the first. That is, you're not really changing. Eshini's letter says, I don't feel inferior as a woman. Your story says, I don't feel inferior as a woman. So it seems to me that your fictional letter is saying the same thing as the historical record. So my first question to you is, am I right in reading it this way or not? And then my second question is, do you think that there is a need to, complete or to even change the historical message by writing fictional stories that give a very different view about women in Buddhism?
Well, thank you for teeing up such a great question. So yes, you're right about Eshini. That was more a fleshing out. But I was very careful in areas. I have a story that takes place in 5th century Anuradhapura, Sri Lanka. So I get two Sri Lankan specialists to help me. So when I don't know something, I went to experts to find out the information. And I was very careful because for the fiction part of it to be something you can enter into and believe that world, the details have to be resonant with the history as we know it. So I was careful with that. And with Eshini, we don't know what she thought about the Vimalakirti Sutra, but there was enough that I felt like, yes, I'm just pulling out what I already can see and surmising, but it seems like she might have if we talked with her. For the other stories, including the one about the Blood Pond Sutra, there too, finding out that there were thousands of these stone markers. And so each stone marker must, 15, 30 women per stone marker in a village? So I suddenly saw the landscape of Japan in a way I never saw before. Because when I first heard about this Blood Pond Sutra, I'm like, well, why I chose to write about it was because I was trying to take the most misogynist, heinous parts of the Buddhist tradition I could put together and see if, and this is answering your second question, see if there was a way, lacking full historical information, but could, like a Dharma liberation theology, Buddhist women's liberation theology, is there a way we can take what we know and find a dharmic response? How could you apply how might a woman apply the Dharma in the face of these negative, oppressive practices, teachings, that you could apply the Dharma to it and respond and not just be left a victim of oppression and being treated inferiorly? How can you, isn't the Dharma supposed to be able to help us do that? And so I challenged myself. This was the Blood Pond. There was no story like this when I started. It was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? This is so horrible. And then I have 9 principles. And one of them that I used to write these stories, and one of them was take an embodied perspective. And so I thought, okay, all these women, they get time away from whatever it is they usually do at home, and it's probably a lot of work. Everyone's going to support them and let them leave for an evening once a month And then she gets to get together with all these women. And so whatever that sutra says, these women coming together, they're going to talk about their lives, especially if the sutra is about, menstrual and patriarchal blood. They're going to be thinking about pregnancy and childbirth and loss of life and infant mortality. All those things are going to come up when they meet. And so in that sense of lying to tell the truth, I think at that point I was trying to, even though I conjured up the details, I think it gets to the truth of perhaps what women had done and would do. But I do have an agenda, and that is, how might you apply the Dharma to anything that now I'm more confident in calling things that generate suffering as not the Dharma. It may be under the umbrella of the Buddhist tradition, but it's not the Dharma. And so, but allowing that what is liberating for one person might be different from what's liberating for another person. So for myself and my students, I always say, whenever we come up with something that sounds really not pleasant or unfair, it's like, okay, what is a way that you could take a compassionate interpretation of why that might have developed the way it did. Maybe somebody is helped by that. Like maybe there are some people who imagine a Pure Land with no women. It's like going to a women's college. It's like we don't have to worry about all this other stuff. We get to just be here. And if the Pure Land is a conditions to help you attain enlightenment, well, maybe that's a condition that's helpful for some people. I don't know if at the very end, compassion would require you to face a woman and not get wigged out about it, but I can see maybe that's a condition that's helpful. So trying to imagine, somebody probably thought it was helpful, but they're looking from their own perspective. And so I wanted to look from the woman's perspective, or a woman's perspective. So I did have those considerations in my fictional accounts, bringing out those possibilities, maybe even probabilities.
We have time for opening up, or shall we stop?
Why don't we take a break now for 10 minutes, and keep your questions at the forefront of your minds as we come back, because then we'll begin to address those. Okay? So. Okay. We're back. Thank you, those in Zoom land. I hope you're back also after our break. Okay, then let's hold questions until after this second presentation. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Thank you.
You can remember your questions. Okay. Okay.
So this second part, I've entitled, the first, you didn't hear, but you have a program. Oh, okay. But the second part is Suffering and the Healing Power of Domestic Dharma. And since I worked on monastic Dharma earlier in my research and then started working with lay women, and I thought, well, what do I call it? And I realized, we could just call this domestic Dharma, which was not something I'd heard before, but I think it helps us wrap our minds around it. Okay, so this story is on domestic Dharma. The title, Earthquake and War, Oba-chan's Healing Home. This first is my run-up discussion, not the story yet. Over the course of nearly 15 centuries of Japanese culture being transformed by and transforming the Buddhist tradition, Buddhist values and principles have become thoroughly integrated into mundane activities and common ways of thinking and speaking. It is easy to miss the power of these teachings, especially when they are seen as ordinary, routine, and natural. People are often not conscious that they are engaging the Dharma. In this way, Japanese mothers are often a child's first Buddhist teacher, even if she is not intentionally trying to transmit the Dharma. Mothers, however, rarely receive acknowledgement for being a person's first Buddhist teacher. Nonetheless, to respond to familial needs on a daily basis or in a crisis, many women have become adept at wielding the liberating power of the Dharma. This was the case with my mother. She did not think in terms nor use Buddhist terms. She taught me the Dharma by the way she expected me to behave. As an expression of gratitude for all who provided the conditions for my life, I was to work hard and not give up. It was easy to feel grateful, for I did not suffer like she had. She was born 3 weeks before the 1923 earthquake, leaving her father's legs profoundly injured in his effort to save his infant daughter. It plunged the family into poverty. Although I could not imagine the terror of it, she lived through the bombings and beatings during World War II Japan. Having survived these events, she did not become bitter and resentful. She even married the enemy, my white father from Detroit. She was determined to raise me to recognize how my actions and expressions affected others, to not be self-centered, and to be honest and kind. Now I can see those were lessons in interdependence and no separate self, the undergirding reason it is wise to be compassionate. In a way, for many, one's first Sangha is the family in which one is raised. Whoever it might include, the whole family is involved in shaping a child's world. It is not rare for a child to first taste the prime causes of suffering, delusion, desire, and hatred in the dynamics of a family, facing the socio-political and economic conditions of their times. In Japan, a home altar provides many families with a space to remind people that there are options in the way one can respond to life's challenges. Altars are often centered on memorial rituals for deceased loved ones. Upon passing, many Japanese Buddhist sects have come to refer to a deceased family member as a Buddha. I call such a Buddha a personal Buddha, for families engage with them as a wise, compassionate, and understanding being who looks after the family. In this manner, Japanese familial relationships connect life and death, extending the network of support a family can rely on. Ritually maintaining multi-generational connections often fortifies family members to integrate losses in ways that affirm and strengthen. In these ways, Buddhist modes of being are infused into the foundation, and a home becomes a refuge for healing. I want to underscore the Dharma activities and lessons in the home, because I want people to notice those wielding the liberating power of the Dharma in daily life. Many of these people are women and are little recognized. I also want to free people from or expand the notion that the monastic mode of Buddhist practice is the only serious form of Buddhist practice. The monastic mode predominates among first-generation lay Buddhists in the West because it takes more time to cultivate a culturally attuned mode of Buddhist practice in the home. Most families would not thrive with strict rules of when and how to do things like sensibly expected in a monastic environment. Of course, a monastic mode of practice is powerful. It is, however, not easy to integrate into the dynamics of home life. I have heard many first-generation Buddhists suffer from anxiety that they don't have enough time to practice, because practice is understood to happen on the meditation cushion. This is not necessarily a male practice, but I've heard more first-generation Buddhist women complain that they can't engage in Buddhist practice because of domestic and childcare responsibilities. And I don't think I'm talking to most people in this audience with a robust domestic Dharma, but though most in the Shin community are from multi-generational Buddhist families, where Buddhist teachings are baked into daily life, it will take more time for first-generation Buddhists to cultivate intuition about how to integrate Buddhist teachings and practices into home life. I wrote this story to help usher that process along, and to convey the Dharma in the home can be deep enough to hold profound grief and strong enough to liberate people from hate. Though we have documentation for many people in 20th century Japan, we do not have detailed records of what the average mother and grandmother thought and taught to their children and families. This story, deliberately set during the Great Earthquake of 1923 and World War II, enables us to consider how women in the home helped their families survive and heal from major life tragedies. The dates of events are historically accurate: earthquake, bombings, and soldier deployment and return. Except for the name of one location, all the other locations and names are historically documented: Tokyo, Senmon Gakko or Waseda University, Okuma Gardens, 3 locations in Asakusa, Sensoji Temple, Daikokuya Restaurant, and Ryounkaku. Higashi Nihonbashi, the Sumida River, Pearl Harbor, the Pacific Island of New Britain. I don't know how to pronounce this anything but Japanese. Rabaul, R-A-B-A-U-L. I'm keep looking for an audience where someone knows how to pronounce that except in Japanese. I only heard it in Japanese. Rabaul, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. The ritual practices, ritualized words, and common phrases described in the story are all authentic. To this history, I bring to life the friends and members of a 3-generation fictive family that runs a fictive soba shop, Waraku. The Ishikawa family includes Oba-chan, Oji-chan, their adult son Isamu, daughter-in-law Emiko, and their son/grandson Kazuki. The daily rhythm of life for the Ishikawa family was governed by the needs of running their soba shop, Waraku, eat, enjoy together. Being near the university, they had a steady stream of students, especially at lunch. Oba-chan and Oji-chan opened the soba shop shortly after they were married in 1892. The university was established 10 years before. They thought being near the campus would be a promising location, though it was a quieter area. They lived in a house attached to the shop. In time, they had children who grew up and went on to start their own families. The eldest son, Isamu, however, stayed home and helped run the soba shop. He married Emiko in 1920. Life was stable and cheerful. In 1922, 2 wonderful things happened. Their first grandchild, Kazuki, was born, and the nearby Okuma Garden was donated to the university. This brought more business to their soba shop, just as the needs of the family were increasing. In addition to students, those wanting to stroll through the gardens would make it a nice outing by stopping for a meal at Waraku. One Saturday, Oji-chan went to Asakusa with an old friend. His friend wanted to go to Sensoji, an ancient and powerful temple, to pray to Kannon for his aging mother. She caught a cold and it was just not clearing up. She seemed to be declining. After offering incense, they waved the smoke over their bodies, especially their heads and hearts. They wanted to transport the healing blessings to their families. They went up to the main altar, threw coins in the offering box, and bowed their heads for an extended time. They turned around to go back down the steps and turned right to look for a place for lunch. It was a treat for them to eat out. They heard of a place called Daikokuya that was renowned for their tendon. As they walked around looking for the restaurant, they saw the towering Ryo-unkaku. At 12 stories high, it had a commanding presence. Running a restaurant, it was not common to have time to go sightseeing, so they decided to go see it before eating lunch. It felt festive in the midst of a bustling crowd. The earth suddenly began to roar. An earthquake knocked them off balance as the soaring tower began to fracture. Pieces of the building crumbling all around them. Shrieks and panic set in. Oji-chan and his friend were among the 140,000 who perished in what became known as the Great Kanto Earthquake on September 1st, 1923, making Oba-chan a widow at 49. Not being alone in her tragic loss helped her not succumb to self-pity, though grief flooded everyone with sorrow. The family still interacted with Oji-chan at their home altar. His photo was placed in sight, and the mortuary tablet, ihai, that had his Buddhist name engraved in it was placed inside the altar. Death can dissolve delusions, so upon passing, a loved one is recognized as a personal Buddha, an enlightened being who deeply understands and clearly sees you. When persimmons ripened later that fall, one of Oji-chan's favorite fruits, they offered him some on the altar. Later, they ate them as a family at a low table near the altar. It felt like Oji-chan was there. Although Kazuki was only a year old when Oji-chan passed, he grew up having regular casual conversations with him as part of the family. All important milestones were shared with Oji-chan, such as when Kazuki began to talk, started school, and learned to ride a bike. Kazuki knew Oji-chan's favorite foods and always offered them to him first on the altar. Kazuki felt Oji-chan caring for him. He felt connected and protected. Though no one told him directly, Kazuki learned in his bones that death was not the end of a relationship. Indeed, he never thought otherwise because that's all he ever knew. The home altar was an anchor for the heart of the family. It helped them to not be unmoored when life did not go as hoped. The family consulted Oji-chan on matters of import or anxiety, for he was the fount of wisdom in the family. When requesting encouragement from Oji-chan, one could practically hear him intone his favorite motto, Nana, 7 times down, 8 times up. It was his mantra, and he never tired of enjoining people to continue, even after falling down 7 times. He proclaimed, as long as you are alive, you can get up. Even in death, he spurred people to rise. Meals were a time for nourishing both the body and heart. Kazuki grew up with the family putting their hands together in prayer and bowing and saying "itadakimasu" before eating. Gratitude was a staple, and it was always expressed with a bow. Being grateful meant to be consciously aware of all beings, including the sun, rain, and soil, that contributed to the food on their table. The care of farmers bending their backs for hours and hours, days upon days, to plant and tend the rice, buckwheat, daikon, cucumbers, eggplants, satsumaimo, soybeans, and kabocha were all, in a sense, at the table. If Kazuki expressed dislike for some food by eating around it and leaving the unfavored item in the bowl, somebody at the table, mostly his obachan, would say, "Ski kirai wa dame." It's bad to favor or dislike. This one bit of advice required Kazuki to cultivate patience, to not just think about himself, and to respect others who supported him, even though he did not see all of them. Growing up with the quiet chorus of "Ski kirai wa dame," it's bad to favor or dislike, eventually grew into a deeper understanding of how he was part of an interrelated web of relationships. His feelings, choices, and actions affected others. He came to realize that it was not that he didn't matter, but that others mattered too. He could not survive, much less exist, were it not for the help of others. No one ever talked about these things as Buddhist teachings. Kazuki was 19 when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, escalating the war, ravaging the world. In search of the meaning of life, he read a short introductory book on Buddhist teachings. He was surprised to learn that the admonition to not favor or dislike steered him away from 2 of the 3 poisons that generate suffering: greed and hatred. The constant reminders to be respectful and grateful of others hedged him away from the 3rd poison, delusion, especially the root delusion of being a separate self. He asked his mom if she was trying to teach him to be a Buddhist, but she said she was not. She was just trying to raise him to be respectful and grateful. The book he was reading never mentioned Buddhist altars in the home. So Kazuki asked if that made them Buddhist. His mom responded, "I never thought of it that way. It's just the way we respect and let Oji-chan know we are grateful for him." Kazuki felt a tension between how he was raised and the social currents pressing people to be respectful to the Emperor of Japan by supporting the war and being grateful for the military acting bravely in Japan's interests. The letter the family had dreaded arrived, conscripting Kazuki to join the war on April 10, 1942. Every morning thereafter, Oba-chan asked Oji-chan to look over their grandson. Kazuki was sent to a major strategic Japanese hub on the Pacific island of New Britain. Later, the family received a letter from him letting them know he was in the town of Nabauru. They sensed he was putting up a brave front, but they knew he was morally conflicted. He was learning firsthand the wisdom of Oji-chan's motto, though in the shadows he sometimes wondered, rise for what? Snow covered Tokyo on Sunday, February 25, 1945. The city appeared practically pastoral. Isamu decided to check on an old classmate who he heard was struggling. His 2 sons, born 11 months apart, had gone to war and would never come back. He sent his wife and daughter to the countryside to be with her sister on a farm where they might be safe and get enough food. Isamu brought rare treats he got on the black market, coffee and sugar. The hour it took him to ride his bicycle across Tokyo was dismal because this once vigorous metropolis was drained of food, and rations were not enough to fill one's belly. As he approached his friend's house near the Sumida River, just beyond Higashi Nihonbashi, he remembered fun times they had growing up. They had been best buddies. His friend had moved across town for a job after finishing his schooling, so they didn't see each other often. Isamu was feeling nostalgic for those carefree days. Out of nowhere, a B-29 bomber flew overhead. Due to cloudy conditions at the original target, the U.S. military decided to fly up the Sumida River to drop their bombs. Emiko became a widow at age 45. Oba-chan knew how to be there for Emiko losing her husband, but she did not know how to be with herself outliving her son. She was numb. Both of them were numb. 7 times down, 8 times up rang hollow. The war ripped their hearts out. Their fear and love for Kazuki was the only thing that kept them going. When the war was declared over on September 2, 1945, they thought the hell realm they had been enduring the last 6 months was over. They miraculously survived the firebombing raid that desecrated Tokyo. The atomic bombs that obliterated Hiroshima and Nagasaki were incomprehensible. They thought no news about Kazuki was good news, because most people hear when their child has died. But they still could not exhale. They rose every morning and prayed to Oji-chan and Isamu that today would be the day Kazuki came home from war. Autumn foliage fell. No Kazuki. Snow fell. No Kazuki. Spring flowers bloomed. No Kazuki. On May 26, 1946, 266 days after the war ended, each day suspended in an eternal limbo of hope and agony, Kazuki came home. The 3 of them sobbed cathartic tears as they lit incense and thanked Oji-chan and Papa for protecting Kazuki. Kazuki, however, was a ghost of the young man who went to war 4 years ago. He could not unsee nor unhear the horrors he lived through. Even as he doubted any purpose for existing, being home was a relief. Kazuki went through the motions of getting up and helping out. He repaired damage to the soba shop and house sustained during the war. As the months passed, Kazuki began to hear Oji-chan whisper in his ear, 7 times down, 8 times up. Kazuki started repeating it under his breath as he went through the day, finding things to repair and neighbors to help. It was now his mantra. Despite not having clarity about what value getting up had, he trusted Oji-chan would not lead him astray. So he kept getting up and matter-of-factly doing what was needed in the moment. He felt ashamed that he did not feel gratitude for being alive when hundreds of thousands had been killed, including his own father, and his beloved Oma-chan and mother had survived. Finally, Kazuki opened up and confessed to Oba-chan that during the war, he had learned to hate. Oba-chan, too, had to confront the hatred that had burned in her heart after Kazuki's father, her eldest son, Isamu, was killed. The hatred consumed all the light from her world. She was angry at everything, including Oji-chan, for not protecting their son from harm. Even as she had survived night after night of the fire bombings, she too had no sense of gratitude. Kazuki's mom joined them on the Engawa. She confessed that she, too, had to wrestle with the hatred that was burning her up from the inside out, especially after her husband was killed by an indiscriminate bomb. They sat in silence and let the tears come. None had cried the losses of war until now. Through the long war, they had each been held in suspended animation, afraid to live. Oba-chan broke the silence with a thunderous proclamation that erupted from the depths of her being. "There are no enemies," she gasped as if she too had just heard that commanding voice. The armor she had shielded her heart with cracked open. Her voice rumbled with determination as a part of her old self buried under the rubble of war rose up. Ski kirai wa dame. It's bad to favor or dislike, whether it's vegetables or people. Ski kirai wa dame. Exhaling audibly, Kazuki's mom got up to cut some persimmons. Kazuki offered some to Oji-chan and Papa first. They sat together and savored the flavor of autumn. Exhaling, Oba-chan gazed beyond the treetops where the sun painted the sky in soft pinks and purples. It probably had done so countless times in the past last years, but she had not looked up to see. She motioned with her head for the others to look up too. Gratitude began to trickle from their aching but healing hearts. This next story is an ethnographic portrait, so it's all true, titled "Buddha Was Asleep in Our Home." Sunlight streamed through the Douglas fir branches as Saya and I sat at her walnut kitchen table. Saya has a warmth and gentleness that drew me in. Having weathered 7 decades, I knew her story would include times of trouble. I surmised that due to her Japanese-American heritage, her family suffered the blatant racism and wartime incarceration, a communal suffering that stained the U.S. Constitution. Given her graciousness, I wondered what other personal trials had polished her kind heart. She leaned forward and looked squarely into my eyes. The gravity of sacred time and space pulled us closer as she began. "I've never told anyone this before. I was in my 20s. I had an abortion. For over 50 years, only her partner knew. He accompanied her across state lines to receive the procedure, since it wasn't available in the state they lived in. He did care for her afterward, too. It was a mutual decision. They weren't ready to responsibly parent. We did not regret our decision. Yet, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. It's not that I feel shame, but it's so personal. Something unresolved lingers in me. There's a dialogue inside me. There's a longing to connect, but I don't know how. I decided to share this because of the times we live in now. So many women are suffering. Girls who are raped must carry a baby and they don't know what is going on with their bodies. Women with complications in pregnancy dying because doctors fearing jail will wait to not hear a heartbeat before they will treat a woman. Since many will read your book, I wanted to share how the Dharma helped me in ways that I am only now learning how to articulate. It had been so deeply embedded in daily life that I didn't have words to understand it, but I realize now that it has undergirded my whole life. My family did not, this is quoting, my family did not do explicit rituals or have Buddhist images. They came to the U.S. in the early 1900s. When they came from Japan, they did not know what to expect. They feared that having explicit Buddhist items might subject them to adverse treatment, so they did not bring them. They did not know that they did not look, they did know that they did not look like the anglicized depictions of Jesus or Mary. They did not know that coming to this land to till fields and grow vegetables would become a threat to white Americans. Rounded up into internment camps, they were forcibly detained behind barbed wire on land that was not arable. Our family was one of the fortunate ones, for a white man looked after our family farm and returned it to us when my family was freed. I was born not long after that. My mom was quite young, so Oba-chan pretty much raised me. Living on a farm, we always had a lot of food, and there was always a lot of sharing. Aunties, uncles, cousins, and neighboring farm families were my world. My Oba-chan was Buddhist, so I knew I grew up culturally Buddhist. It recently became clear to me that I had actually been raised in the Dharma. I was living it but not knowing it. It was just the way things were done. I see now that Oba-chan taught me by how she carried herself, how she lived her ethics. She expected me to as well. The qualities she embodied include honesty, hard work, reliability, integrity, generosity, to stand tall, to be a good person, to be kind. I learned gaman, a kind of patience or forbearance, from my grandmother. She came to this country with harsh conditions. Gaman got her through dark times, including the war and incarceration. Gaman enabled her to make lemonade out of lemons. Gaman doesn't translate well into English because it's not based on an individualistic sense of self. Awareness of our dependence on each other is implicit in gaman. Being patient or exhibiting fortitude is experienced as being an important part of a larger whole, which is integral to a relational notion of self. You are not alone, and you are not doing things just for yourself. Your actions affect others. So when you endure a difficult situation, you are enacting your respect and care for the greater whole. I have learned that gaman is a mature response to not getting what you want. Gaman is an antidote to self-pity. It is not about self-denial, but about understanding there are limitations to conditions and resources. Gaman is a patience that stretches you. It is founded on a network of support. You do not have to have concrete knowledge of the past to draw on ancestral strength and wisdom, because it is baked into current conditions. Gaman is also an expression of respect for conditions of the present and awareness that consequences of one's actions ripple out into the future. Gaman is driven by a sense of gratitude for what you have received and moral responsibility for those who will be affected by your choices. Gaman has helped me see things from a bigger perspective. To know that I am not alone in my times of forbearance, it makes it easier to regulate my emotions as they course through me. I have come to appreciate how growing up in a farming family kept me close to nature and community. I learned the cycle of life and death growing up on a farm among all my cousins, aunties, and uncles. We were there for each other through births, holidays, sicknesses, and deaths. The transformation of seasons was also a teacher that gave instruction through changes in temperature, sunlight, rain, wind, and soil. Through tiny sprouts and harvested vegetables. To this day, gardening keeps me in touch with the natural dynamics of reality. That's how I approach things. It guides how I process emotions. Nature flows with birth and death, and I am part of that. It makes me want to have my hands in the soil. The growing and planting season is important to me. It's the nurturing, the concern if the little ones will make it. Others can handle the harvest. I want to care for the vulnerable seedlings and insects. I've watched the interactions of insects moving around the flowers. They show me how all things are interconnected. This view of the circle of life fortified me as I cared for my aging father. He was the oldest of 4 sons. They all worked the farm together. After he got sick, they pressured him to retire early. Farming was his whole world, his identity. So to not work was devastating for him. Although he adored his children, he had anger issues. Since I was the eldest in my generation, my mom raised me to set a good example for my younger siblings and cousins. I had to be sure to not behave in any way that was disrespectful, because the younger ones would see what I did. I would set the standard. Moreover, what I did would reflect on everyone. I had pressure to keep our family name upright, which included honoring our elders. Being raised this way, I was obliged to care for him. It felt natural. When my mother began to decline, I cared for her too. For 2 years, I slept in her bed with her. Because the dementia was so pronounced, I had to be there to help, to clean up after her. It was not easy. She was the sweetest person, but once the dementia set in, at times she became obstinate and angry. I was always concerned. Was she going to go out the gate into the street? Did she poop and pee on the floor again? Once she even threw her walker at a family member trying to care for her. Then she fell down. We had to take her to the ER. She told them the person was trying to shoot her. It was like living in a hell realm for everyone. The Dharma teachings on compassion were my armor, protecting me from erupting in frustration and shielding us all from anger. I also thought of how she cared for me so tenderly and patiently while raising me. I remember being a child falling asleep with my head on her lap as she cleaned my ears with a bamboo ear cleaning stick. It was so calming. I felt so cared for. I wanted to give her that. Being in touch with the circle of life was my liberation. Here I am, nearing the end of my 7th decade, and I finally found a way to communicate in a consciously healing way with my Mizuko, my water child. I learned about the Japanese Buddhist Mizuko ritual. It helps me acknowledge the loss and engage in an ongoing relationship by doing the simple acts of lighting a candle, offering incense and flowers from the garden, and a little treat. It gives me an embodied connection with my Mizuko, enabling me to express respect both to my Mizuko and myself. I do it quietly by myself on the 24th of the month. It is the auspicious day for Jizo Bodhisattva. Jizo's compassionate focus is to usher beings through different realms, holding a special place for Mizuko. Mizuko are beings who returned to primordial waters without setting foot on the earth and await auspicious conditions to return. In a way, caring for caterpillars in my garden and watching them change is a Mizuko ritual for me. Not all of them make it. It happens before your eyes. It's watching life and death. It happens in a short period of time. It's a beautiful thing to watch the colors change, too, from yellows and greens to black pupa. It is a sublime wonder to watch the wings expand as they drip dry before taking flight. Observing this phenomenon is a meditation on metamorphosis. As I age, my friends age. More of them are facing infirmity, disease, and intense diagnoses. I too have had brushes with diagnoses and conditions that remind me that I am part of the circle of life and death. After hours of conversation, Saya handed me a poem. It bubbled up in her heart after she was honored as an elder in her current Sangha, which was a few weeks before we met. She says that poems sometimes come to her, usually indicating a bud of new growth. Buddha was asleep in our home. As a young child, I never knew. He didn't need to show himself in statues and icons. He lived in the hearts of my people. They embodied his way and shared his teaching. He was happy. He could rest. I found traces he was living with us much later. After much time had passed, I was unaware. I just thought they were my grandmother's things. I found the prayer beads. I walked in a huge circle to come home, a long winding circle called life. I'm almost finished. Today I live with Buddha again. I have a new home. I found a new family that lives with Buddha. Maybe I can live without the icons and images, but now it's a different time. I'm lucky to live without the fear. And I like all the images of the Buddha, especially the ones that look like I belong too. I found home. I'm so happy. Saya's poem reminds me of the women's poems in the Therigatha. Saya is finally free from the suffering she and her family endured due to racism, xenophobia, and her personal life choices. Open expressions of the Dharma are now a source of comfort and strength, though her experience tells her that the most important expression of Dharma is that which animates her heart. Stories have fueled the Dharma for over 2,500 years. They have been adapted in each era, in each place, and in each community to inspire people to apply the Dharma in their lives. Though women have been integral to this phenomena, many stories about their activities may never be known, and others have yet to be discovered and told. We can amplify women's contributions by trumpeting the fact that without women nurturing enough people with Dharma activities to keep the Dharma alive, the Buddhist tradition would not have lasted through the millennia and become the global network of wisdom teachings and transformative practices that guide and support those facing injustice, fear, difficult childbirth, crippling chronic pain, degenerative disease, and loss of loved ones. The stories in this book about women in particular communities at specific times gives a glimpse of the richly textured ways that women's hands, hearts, and minds have shaped the Buddhist tradition over the centuries. Collectively, these women illustrate how once your compassion is no longer captive to the poisons of delusion, attachment, and hate, you are free to pour compassion on all in your midst, including yourself. It changes how you perceive what is happening, enabling to you to see how those who generate conditions of oppression are themselves suffering. The women herein manifest how wielding liberating power involves creatively unleashing compassion and courageously brandishing a sword of wisdom to cut off the causes of suffering. All of these women became my Kalyana Mitra, my Dharma friends. In Sanskrit, Kalyana means benevolent, virtuous, and generous. Mitra means friend, the one who has been with us. May the woman you met through these stories become your Dharma friends too. For with the wise and compassion ministrations of Dharma friends, we can blossom. An interchange recounted in the Pali Canon comes to mind. Ananda asks the Buddha, "Is it true that Kalyana Mitra are an important part of the spiritual path?" Buddha responds, "No, it is not true that Kalyana Mitra are an important part of the spiritual path. Kalyana Mitra are the entirety of the path." Dharma friends are integral to the Dharma path because they share the aim to dissolve delusion, attachment, and aversion. They are committed to being there and encouraging you along the path of enlightenment. Companions that call you to live in accord with your highest principles. They respect you and care about your well-being. Dharma friends listen to your heart and attune to your concerns, values, fears, and aims. They redirect you when you wander down an unhelpful path and uplift you when you are down. Dharma friends support us, make insightful observations, and walk with us. Dharma friends are those who blossom in the mud and help us blossom there too. They empower us by generating sympathetic resonance, much like the Chinese concept of Ganying or Kannon in Japanese. Kan is a stimulus, and On is a compassionate response. For example, a stimulus might be that one friend expresses anger over a recent event, and the other friend responds by observing the anger might arise out of shame over an unresolved issue stemming from the past. It takes astute insight to help effectively in such a situation. Since myriads of causes and conditions give rise to events, the skill required to meet suffering is often subtle, nuanced, and dynamic. In attuning to you and the fullness of the present moment, they can set in motion waves of wise and compassionate energy. In other words, they see both the ways we suffer and our potential to be liberated. A Dharma friend, by definition, is a friend who does this. Seeing through the world through the eyes of a Dharma friend enables us to see both suffering and liberative healing. Doing so means becoming a Dharma friend to oneself. We are each our own oldest friend. We were there through everything. We know intricate details about events, even things stored in our bodies that have faded from our conscious memories. To heal requires self-compassion, to see ourselves with a piercingly clear mirror that also reflects the vast web of interrelationships that support, protect, and generate us. To perceive this involves accepting ourselves in all our particularity, complete with shame that blankets our hearts, the fear that quivers in our bones, and the delusions that muddle our minds. It also involves engaging with the forces that flow through the structures that organize specific socio-historical contexts, as well as the larger environmental conditions. Being a Dharma friend to the world makes palpable the impact of narrow-minded, patriarchal, and small-hearted actions. Such exploits are potent and persistent. They produce layer upon layer of delusion that often diminish our sense of possibility and generate perceived obstacles to our liberation. They often distract us from our capacity to be compassionate. Approaching such situations in a relational, personal, emotional, and embodied way is to be a Dharma friend to the world. Doing so facilitates the flow of liberation in the world. The key lies in flexibility and intimate responsiveness, like water moving through rocks in a river, caressing each stone. No resistance, only acceptance. The water does not experience a rock as being in its way or being in the wrong place. Water and rocks dance harmoniously. Rocks are the stimulus, kan, and the water is the compassionate response, on. Over time, the sympathetic resonance of rock and water transforms the landscape. Monumental changes occur as water offers its streaming ministrations to the rocks. The more we respond to the cries of the world as water responds to rocks, the better a Dharma friend we are to the world. Indeed, water is a vital Dharma friend, providing the planet and all its beings with life-sustaining nourishment. Oceans, too, are among our most fundamental Dharma friends. Often described as the womb of our planet, oceans provide conditions to produce life forms and protect them as they take shape. Women's wombs, too, are Dharma friends. A woman's body generates the conditions for a life to grow, even funneling calcium from the mother's teeth and bones, if needed, to provide for the being growing inside her, and channeling the interstellar heat that gave rise to iron that pumps through her heart so she can nurture the baby's heart. Perceiving ourselves as Dharma friends activates our senses to attune to the whimpers in our midst. In response to the incalculable ways people harm, hold each other back, and worse, we can choose to be unflinching in our resolve to be compassionate, to alleviate suffering. We can write Dharma stories that invoke delusional practices to cultivate awareness of our interdependence, to model transforming hatred into clear peace. Being a Dharma friend enriches the quality of Dharma stories we can write, because such stories immerse us in suffering and illuminate healing. Seeking and discovering Buddhist women's liberating power and honing our imaginations to bring to life the Buddhist historical record and philosophical teachings, we can illuminate how women could and have tailored the Buddhist tradition in ways that liberate themselves and others. Collectively, we can weave subtle detail and luster into the fabric of our Buddhist narrative and herald the many ways Buddhists, past and present, respond to suffering and seek liberation. The creative expedient of embodied storytelling enables us to hear the voices of women who paved the way for our presence here today, and connect to the truth of their serious wisdom insights. In so doing, we deepen the pool of wise teachers to guide us and revealed their liberating strategies. I welcome each of you to join me in being our own best Dharma friends and expanding our sphere to help us create a community that cultivates healing relationships and creates spaces that are refuges of peace. May we move together as Dharma friends, propelling a vision of liberation to awaken our muddy world with lotus blossoms that emit the fragrance of wisdom and open the heart of compassion. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Paula. And now we'll have George come up and make some comments. And following that, we'll open it up for further discussion. I know that in our program we said we'll run till 9 o'clock. If you have something to do, please feel free to follow your own schedule. And if you need to leave at 9 o'clock, please kind of exit to the back door. But if you can stay until we conclude, that would be preferred. So thank you. Okay, George.
Okay. And that will be at 10 o'clock.
Or later.
Or later, yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, your stories are all very, very suggestive, and I have a half dozen different questions and responses. But before I go into mine, I want to open it up to everybody so that you have a chance to ask Paula questions, and then if we have some time afterwards, then I'll go to mine. But why don't we open it up to everybody here and also to whoever has tuned in to the on the Zoom. So, questions, comments. You better say something, because otherwise I'm going to monopolize. No, go ahead. Yes.
So what is the story about the girl and growing up with on the farm, that kind of thing? I could really relate to that. I grew up in Arizona, and we were really lucky because we were in an area where the boundary for going to the camps missed my grandfather's place. So they were able to stay where they were, but my father and mother were in LA, so they moved, and they were fortunate to find a workers' housing on my mother's father's farm that they didn't have. So they were very lucky in that sense. So they suffered in other ways by being there. But anyway, I could really relate to what she was talking about. But I grew up with an altar in a very active, Buddhist environment. So that was a little bit different.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. Thank you.
Aloha, thank you for being here. Sorry I missed the first half, but one of the remarkable things about discovering the Dharma in Northern California and practicing the Dharma in Northern California was the KM groups. I practiced with, I wasn't a part of a KM group for Kalyana Mitra group, by the way, for about 4 years. Twice a month we would sit together, we would check in, we would have a text, we would eat together, and just address kind of the scope of what was going on in our life and in our practice. And that, I feel that more Dharma communities, whatever tradition they may be, really need to provide that sort of container for people to really interact with one another and the teachings as well. Because what better teaching than life, right? Like when that woman was in her bed with her mother, who was wetting herself and etc. for years, that's the reality of old age, that's the reality of illness, the the reality of impending death. And that's sort of the gift of the teachings, is that we, in the Western culture, all of these things are meant to be shunted away and compartmentalized. But in the Buddha Dharma, we actually embrace that reality, and we endeavor to bring compassion and attention to that in the best way that we can. So thank you for bringing that forward tonight.
Oh, thank you for sharing. When you said Northern California, I thought, where am I? Because I'm also from California, and I thought I was in Hawaii. Okay, yeah, okay.
Anyone else?
Okay, thank you. What intrigues me is, going back to your first presentation, is how anyone could fall for this blood pool sutra thing, because it's so outrageously sexist and oppressive. And it was clearly not just fiction, it was completely fake. It's apocryphal. They just cooked it up. Somebody cooked it up. So how can you explain that it took such traction and that people actually bought into this?
Well, I actually, I have a principle. Don't take the lack of evidence as evidence of lack. So that we do not know how women in China responded to this. We do know that it facilitated non-primary wives who had children to get their children to be able to do a funerary ritual, recognizing them as their mother. So I have a hard time believing that a bunch of women thought, oh my God, they're right. There's something so wrong with my body. So in a story I didn't share today, but, I talk about how, a mother who gives birth to sons and daughters, she's aware they were as dependent on her whether they were male or female. And if some of those males grew up and wrote something that was really negative about woman, I'm taking my embodied perspective, I'm thinking, what would a mother think? And I'm thinking, she might think, maybe someday he'll mature more. Maybe he will get non-dual wisdom someday. She's not going to suddenly think, oh my God, I'm such a terrible person. He's right. My body is polluted. Because she birthed him, she raised him. And of course, this way of thinking strains the actual timing of things like that. In terms of when texts were written and who gave birth to who, but I'm sure there are women, clearly, historically, who have suffered because of such teachings got purported to be the Dharma. But I mean, even you see it in the Therigatha, there's some pretty spunky, very insightful women. And they didn't just appear like in 20th century modern West. I mean, they've been around all along. And so I think some probably did see right through it and say, that can't be it. And most weren't literate, so they didn't even get the memo how bad they were. And then there are those who maybe had a heavy dose put on them and they thought, and they doubted themselves. And I think the spectrum is there. But because we don't have the documents, we don't have the evidence that, yes, they saw through it. But we do have hints here and there that women did not, either they didn't get the memo, lived like they didn't get the memo, or lived like they realized that was somebody else's problem, that was not the Dharma. So that's my general sense, but we still need to use our imaginations, and uncovering history is tough. We'll never know, but at least we can move forward with how to see more clearly.
That's why we write new stories, right?
Yes, that's why we write new stories for new times. Yes.
Hi, Aloha. Thank you so much for this time. I love to thank you for your time. And I have a compository of question, but I wanted to say, as far as for each excerpt, there is like a running theme, and it was about the cycle of life and how we go through depths within those cycles of life, whether it's death, whether it's giving life, whether it's planting a seed and watching it grow. And so I'd like to hear from you more of your perspective of both karma and dharma, and that leading to the path of bodhisattva.
That's a very big question.
Yeah.
I'll say one thing, just because it's not usually published, although I finally did put it in something that is published. I don't remember where, but so they're all, what is karma is not a clear, just look it up in the dictionary, everyone agrees. And what is not textual, but common, you go to, do you know Obon services? And a lot of the Dharma talks around Obon are about thanking your ancestors for everything they did for you. And there isn't some sense that they could transmigrate into a chicken. And the confusion, my take on this, which I got from my mentor, Nagatomi Sensei, that the karma line doesn't go through the individual, it goes through the family line. And so the ancestors are, it's very deft psychologically, I think. You thank them for all the wonderful things in your life. The things the conditions that maybe aren't so wonderful, you don't focus on, well, you can get angry at them for setting up those conditions. But they turn that into, you be vigilant to be careful of the conditions you're generating for your progeny or for the future. And so karma running through the family line. And now what we know about epigenetics and what we know about various kinds of suffering, abuse, alcoholism, that they do kind of, it tracks with this Buddhist notion or this non-text-based East Asian notion of respecting elders, and the karma runs through the family line. So I'm just going to throw that out there, even though I know it doesn't answer your question, but it's a little piece of a little bit of what's going on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a comment. Oh, here you go.
Thank you also for this. I didn't know what I was coming into, and so this is very surprising, and I'm excited. It's very exciting. And you had mentioned the red pool, right? And you had red, and you said, do you know anything like that here? And nobody commented, but in Hawaiian culture, when the woman was going through that time of the month, they called it a red tent. And so the women went to the red tent, and from what I understand is that they were excluded from things, but in a way they enjoyed the time off.
Yeah.
And they enjoyed the camaraderie, and they enjoyed being together as the women. That's what I understood it as. It wasn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
even though it was for, I mean, they were put away because the men didn't want to deal with these emotional women at the time. And the women were like, hey, man, we're happy, man. We're cool. We don't have to cook. You guys do your cooking. We'll hang out in the tent. That's what I understood it as, but I'm not sure exactly, but yeah.
Thank you. Good to know.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's what I wanted to share about it. There is this spirituality even up until this moment. And I want to share a little bit of my own studies too of different, healing modalities. And this is one of it. We women gather and express all our shame, all our fears. We express the things we've suppressed. So when we are witness in front of a woman who've been through, it dilute, it transmute all the pain. And when we come into healing, as what you said, the Dharma circle, and this is the circle for women, where we get to express to more than beyond blood and timelines and generations that we carried in our DNA. And yeah, that is something that I just wanted to share, but thank you.
Yes.
So, Dr. Paula, thank you so much. I want to discuss something that is factual but also a little bit controversial. It has to do with women in a roles of consortship. And for those of us who know the background, Padmasambhava, he had a consort which is Yeshe Sogo, one of the most revered maybe mother of modern Tibetan Buddhism, So at this day and age, there are some high lamas and rinpoches who, I'm not trying to put any judgment on this. I'm just being open about my discussion, that see it as acceptable to still take consorts. And oftenly they approach the Sangha, the student body, and which opens a whole field of exploitation. However, in many ways, I've seen a podcast recently of an actual consort who lived her whole life, a part of her life with an actual highly regarded Lama. This consort's name is Kunzong Chodron. You can actually catch her podcast on YouTube. And she describes how it was done in a very pure way. So if it's done in a very pure way, where she has the role of consortship with the teacher, and also she was also the wife of the teacher. My question to you, Dr. Paula, your perception, how does this role uphold the Dharma? And if it doesn't uphold, how is it muddling it at the same time? I may have one or two more other questions, but that's my main question. And your viewpoint about tradition versus modern time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm drawing primarily on the scholarship of Miranda Shaw, who knows more about Vajrayana Buddhism than I do. That's not my specialty. What I appreciate, are you familiar with her book, Passionate Enlightenment?
No, who is the author of that?
Miranda Shaw.
Miranda Shaw.
The one who saw the stupa as a supine woman's belly. And so she looked up a lot of textual material that I think quite convincingly suggests that many women were the initiators of practices of union. And the woman had to accept the man. And that the English word consort, I don't know the Tibetan, I do not know. But she finds the English word consort, translating whatever the Tibetan is misleading and has a baggage that was not present in the tradition.
Yes.
Having said that, there's abuse of power in every single doctrine institution that you can, once you start looking into it, people are not enlightened in their behavior. And so whether the woman who says it was done in a pure way, I would believe it's possible. And the word consort is just like, I don't think it works to characterize a pure Dharma relationship of that nature. I just don't think it works. But because we've got that word out there and people use it, then I think it invites abuse of power in a way that is not in accord with the Dharma.
Understood. Thank you.
Dave, are there questions from the Zoom? No?
There were these questions and that were from earlier, and I want to ask one precisely because there's someone who can answer it much better than me in our presence. Are women in Tibetan Buddhism similar or different from, and this is a long question so you don't have to answer it all, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Mahayana Buddhist women? So our Venerable Karma-Leshe Zomo, what do you see about Tibetan Buddhist women compared to, you can choose whoever you want to compare it to.
I would argue that every person's experience is unique, individual, and cultures change. People are, of course, conditioned by their cultural background. Essentially, human beings are very similar, as the Dalai Lama continually says. But each stream of Buddhism is so incredibly unique that, of course, their practices and their understandings of Dharma are going to be individual and unique. So I think it's very difficult to compare across traditions, because you'll run into questions like this. The word is actually secret mother, Sangyum. And I mean, that's even more problematic than consort, isn't it? But you don't find this concept, at least overtly, in other Buddhist traditions. Though hanky-panky goes on everywhere, but it's special to the Tibetan tradition in the context of tantric practice. And of course, well, that's a long discussion. So I guess we have to just appreciate that women's experience is different according to how they grow up, the values they learn. And that's why your presentation is so valuable, because these ordinary activities of daily life to be seen as Dharma is something that I think you're the leading exponent. So I thank you for that, because a lot of us are always thinking of Dharma as something very formal, very programmed, very ritualistic, and so on. And you really brought it home. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I was a little nervous. She's writing the foreword to the book, and I don't know what she thinks yet.
Because I haven't written it yet.
Oh. Well, thank you. I will remember your response to this question. But let's turn to you, George. These other questions, I think there were several addressed in what happened.
Yeah, okay, well, fairly simply, you gave examples of Kalyana Mitra, Dharma friends, across a very broad scale, including even sort of nature, So my question is, who is a Dharma friend? I mean, like most people, I have, like everybody, I think, I have friends who run the spectrum from, good to bad and in between and a mixture and all of that. So who is a Dharma friend? Are all of my friends Dharma friends, or are the ones who fit a certain profile Dharma friends, but others are not? And if so, what is that profile?
So I actually thought, oh, I have to be very careful here. And so I don't remember the words, although I worked very hard on them, but that a Dharma friend is the one who is there for you. And, oh, I remember, that they see your potential for liberation and they see your suffering. They see both. That to me, got to the core of a Dharma friend. And then they do things to support you. But they see both, the suffering and the liberative possibility. They can't just see the suffering. A Dharma, because then you're like clueless. Well, what will help you stop suffering? You must see the liberative potential.
If that's the case, I have, for myself, precious few Dharma friends. I don't have too many people who see me that way, you know, in terms of the suffering and
George,
my potential for...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you use the microphone, please?
Oh, okay.
You have one. You have
Yeah,
one.
I have it. I'm losing my mind. My comment is that if that's the case, then I have very few Dharma friends. That is to say, people who see my suffering and also my potential for, getting out of that suffering. So it's a small group for me. I don't know about anybody else, but that will be a very small group for me. I'm sorry to say.
I take that as summoning me to be a Dharma friend to other people, to see their potential, to see their suffering. And that when I added in nature, with interdependence, I thought, well, where does it stop? And then to even just feel like sitting on these chairs, like gravity is our Dharma friend right now. And that comes about because we're a certain mass and we're a certain distance from, all those things. And, but then our bones are our Dharma friends when we can stand up. They're supporting us to, compassion isn't abstract. It's a concrete thing. A concrete thing to do, and seeing the activity of the mind is part of that, of course. But so when I started using Dharma friend, I started seeing, well, it just keeps going out. And so if I can't count, too many that I would say can do that for me, I saw it, but look at all these other beings or forces that are doing it for me. So I didn't feel so bad. But yeah, it's a rare, but then we can try and be that for each other, is to me the way I read that. If I feel like, I don't have many, and then I'm thinking, but how many do I do that for other people? And it shifts the attention.
One more quick question about this whole thing about, stories about fact and fiction. So the, what's his name, Kazuki?
Kazuki.
Yeah, Kazuki's story was a real story, or was that fictional?
So Kazuki is fictional. The family members were fictional. All the dates and locations were real. The date about when going to war, coming back, those were date on a historical person.
Right. But the basic story was fictional, though. I mean,
Right.
Kazuki's
Right.
But the second story, the Japanese American woman,
That's
that
totally
you
true.
said was real.
That's
right?
all true.
Yeah, okay.
Those were quoting her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so maybe it resonated because maybe you're similar ages, lived not geographically too far apart from each other.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions or comments? 9:15, we have 45 more minutes.
just a comment. In the question of consort, I was surprised to find that in that relationship, the male represents compassion, the female represents wisdom. And I initially thought it was the other way around, but I learned that it's the woman that is the wise one.
And in Greek too, isn't Sophia is female too?
Well, I have a comment, I guess. Well, just, thank you for demonstrating the power and effectiveness of storytelling, as a way to share the Dharma. I suppose our sutras, when they were written 2,500 years ago, may have had that same impact, on the listeners, although they don't have the same impact today. So it's up to us, to get better at our storytelling. And I certainly will try, to leverage, more kind of the fictional storytelling in order to, try to spread the message. The other thing is that also over the past 2 days, we've had this fall ministers seminar that focused a lot on your teachings of the 10 principles of healing, and the book I was cited. I found it. When I met her, when they just arrived, I said I couldn't find your book, but I knew I had it somewhere. So I found it. And this is the Bringing Zen Home that documents all of the 15 years of research that you did with the Japanese women and their stories, that from which you developed your 10 principles of healing. And from our Shin Buddhist side of things, we do a lot of funerals and memorial services, and we focus on coping with grief, in those rituals, But what you shifted my perspective in that we're really not coping with grief, but we're healing, trying to find the path of healing, and that's kind of a more positive way to help to relieve suffering, and because I found that resonated kind of directly with myself. My wife passed away a year ago, and I took the Tokudo path in order to cope with my grief. And as I was listening to the seminar and your principles, I found that those 10 principles are the ones that helped me get to today and to heal, rather than just cope. So, thank you, for being the teacher in the right place, when I needed it. Old Buddhist teachings, right?
Well, thank you so much. And it was the women who taught me. And so I am grateful to be part of getting their teachings out, because they thought, the daughters weren't even listening to them. And so they opened up to me because they thought maybe they'll listen to a scholar tell it. And I'll say one thing about storytelling. To me, the key is, we know all kinds of things with our brains, cognition. That doesn't have the kind of transformative power for most people. It's when your emotions are engaged, as wild as they can be, they are powerful. And if we can find ways to touch the deeper emotions, that can help us gather the energy to shift something. So I think that's why stories work. They get at emotions. And so it doesn't have to be fictive. It can be totally true, just like, the last story was totally true. It's not the fiction component. It's that she opened her heart and let me share it with other people. So we don't have to make things up to be moved and transformed, but it can be a wonderful expedient means for it. Thank you all for coming and staying so long. Oh, something more? Tomorrow? Yes. Well, so tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., I'll let them say the place. I'll say what's happening. With the kind of suffering that women have experienced, where it's easy to feel helpless, what can I do to transform the situation? Where we have this first ritual of planting a woman's healing tree. It will be a mango tree. In order there to be a place to go that anyone, this is focused on women who have suffered, but it's really anyone. And I don't know, did you get the rocks? Okay, and then so the offering will be watering the tree to help it live and grow, and it's a mango tree, so it will have fruit that can nourish with the sweet nectar. And you can go to this tree and write the name of someone or just a picture or some thought, and we'll place them in concentric circles to be a way to hold all the women with our love for them and care for them to stop suffering. And we're starting here in Hawaii, but the vision is, because there are unfortunately women suffering the world over, and that we will have a global forest of these healing trees where people in various communities can come together and have a place. But that's what I've found in my healing rituals work, that having a place is how you get your emotions to get activated. It's not just a thought. It's a space, and you do something with your own body, and those are the things that begin to help transforming. And so now I will pass the mic to someone to explain where it is.
So tomorrow's event will be at the Light Peace Center in North Shore. If anyone is interested, I do have an e-flyer that you can I can send to you, or you can take a picture of my phone, and it'll be, all the information will be on there. And I have the exact address on the flyer. Yes. And everybody is welcome, and lunch included. Karma Lekshe Somo is the founder of the Light Peace Center and Sakadita International, and also Jamyang Foundation. She's involved in many nonprofit ventures as well. So please come down, and if you can't come down, please shoot us an email at any time, and we'd be happy to disseminate more information about Lama's Center. Yeah.
One of these
Yes.
other questions asked, are there any enlightened Buddhist women today? And I would like to answer in the affirmative. And we are profoundly honored to have one in our presence. Karma Lekshe Zomo. Seriously, if you knew all the things she's does for our world, I don't know when she's ever slept. Decades of not sleeping much. So she's my inspiration, has been for decades.
Okay, I think that's a wrap. And thank you all for attending the 26th Annual Bloom-Futaba Memorial Lectures. We will be having the 27th in about a year sometime. We already have a speaker, Reverend Doctor now, Aaron Prophet, who Rod and I did our Tokudo ordination with, and he's a professor at the University of Albany, and is has a book out on esoteric Buddhism. So he'll be coming to Hawaii. Thank you, Paula, for being our speaker this year, and I hope your trip here was enjoyable and continues to be so. And thank you for being the first steward of the Ishini and Kakushini chair. I'm sure you'll do wonderful things at IBS, and hopefully we'll cross paths again many times. Okay, mahalo and namo amida butsu.